When we look at dangerous duos from history, there are many examples we can name. From tyrants and dictators to murderers and terrorists, these people have left their mark on world history, and their actions have caused much suffering and misery. In this video, we will discuss a top 10 of the most dangerous pairs from history. But before I take you through that, I want to ask you to subscribe to my channel so you don't have to miss any videos.
Number 10.
Paul Bernardo was a Canadian serial killer who, along with his wife Carla Hamalka, raped and murdered multiple women in the province of Ontario between 1990 and 1992. Bernardo was known as the Scarborough Rapist due to his attacks on women in the Scarborough neighborhood of Toronto. In 1992, Bernardo was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes. His wife Hamalka was sentenced to a lengthy prison term in 1993 after striking a deal with prosecutors. Bernardo's crimes shocked the country and led to a thorough review of Canadian criminal law. He remains a notorious figure in Canada to this day and is regarded as one of the most despicable criminals in Canadian history.
Number 9.
Charles Sobhraj and Marie-Andrée LeClair were a notorious killer couple from the 1970s. Charles Sobhraj was a famous serial killer and con artist known as the Bikini Killer and the Serpent due to his charm and charisma. He had a long history of crimes, including poisoning and murdering tourists in Asia. Marie-Andrée LeClair was Sobhraj's accomplice and lover. She helped him poison his victims and hide the crimes. Together, they traveled around Southeast Asia and committed numerous murders. The couple was eventually arrested in India and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, Sobhraj managed to escape and remained on the run for years before being recaptured. The case against Sobhraj and LeClair was shocking and garnered a lot of media attention. Many people were fascinated by the couple and their crimes, but there was also a lot of disgust for the couple's cruelty and lack of remorse. In the end, Charles Sobhraj ended up in prison, where he would spend the rest of his days. Marie-Andrée LeClair died in 1984 from cancer, despite her young age of 38 years.
Number 8.
Gwendolyn Graham and Catherine Maywood met each other while working at a nursing home and quickly became close friends. They shared many interests and often went out together, such as going to the cinema or taking walks in the forest. But there was something that connected Gwendolyn and Catherine that others couldn't understand. They were obsessed with death. Gwendolyn and Catherine chose to work in a nursing home deliberately because they had easy access to elderly patients who would soon die. At first, they did it just to be close to death, but it didn't take long for them to realize that they also had power over the life and death of the patients. They began to kill patients by administering medication, and enjoyed the feeling of power it gave them. Eventually, they were caught and sentenced to life imprisonment for their crimes. But for Gwendolyn and Catherine, the time in prison was a small price to pay for the power they had felt. They remained close friends and supported each other until the end.
Number 7.
Fred and Rose West were a British couple who between 1967 and 1987 murdered at least 12 people, including their own children. They were known for their gruesome crimes and are considered two of the most infamous serial killers in the history of the United Kingdom. Fred and Rose met in the 1960s and got married in 1972. They quickly became a close couple and began working together to make their dark fantasies a reality. Fred was a sadistic and violent individual, and Rose was a manipulative and ruthless woman. Together they formed a dangerous duo. They began by murdering young women and girls they met, and then buried their bodies in their garden and beneath their house in Gloucester, England. They carried out their gruesome crimes for years without anyone noticing. Eventually, Fred and Rose were arrested in 1994 when the police launched an investigation into Fred's missing daughter. The investigation revealed the gruesome crimes of the couple, and they were both sentenced to life imprisonment. Fred died in prison in 1995 before he could stand trial for his crimes, while Rose remains behind bars to this day.
Number 6.
Karla Faye Tucker and Daniel Garrett were a notorious couple of murderers in the 1980s. The pair was infamous for their cruelty and violent methods. They were responsible for the deaths of at least 2 people, including a woman whom they beat and killed with a hammer and chisel. The couple was eventually arrested and sentenced to death. Karla Faye Tucker became the first woman in Texas to be executed since the reintroduction of the death penalty in 1976. The case against the couple was shocking and elicited a great deal of disgust from the public. The trial and the eventual execution were controversial and sparked much debate about the death penalty in the United States. Despite the gruesome crimes they had committed, there was also sympathy for Karla Faye Tucker, who claimed to have converted and regretted her actions. But it was too late, and she was executed on February 8, 1998. Her accomplice, Daniel Garrett, was executed in the same manner several months later. The couple was notorious and feared until the very end.
Number 5.
Ian Brady and Marie-Andrée were a notorious duo of serial killers in England during the 1960s. They abducted and murdered 5 young children, hiding their bodies in the moors of northern England. Their crimes shocked the nation and led to a national investigation and an intense search for the victims' bodies. They were obsessed with violence and crime. They started by killing young children and capturing their crimes on film. Their first victim was a teenage girl named Pauline Reed. They abducted her on her way to a dance and killed her in the moors. They buried her body under a heavy stone so it would not be found. The next victim was a boy named John Kilbride. Hindley and Brady abducted him at a market and killed him in a remote location in the moors. They also buried him under a heavy stone. In the years that followed, Hindley and Brady killed 3 more children, Keith Bennett, Leslie and Downey, and Edward Evans. They recorded their crimes on film and audio recordings, which they kept as trophies. Eventually, Hindley and Brady were arrested and tried for their crimes. They were sentenced to life imprisonment and spent the rest of their days behind bars. Despite their attempts to cover up their crimes, the victims' bodies were thankfully found.
Number 3.
Lyle and Eric Menendez were convicted in 1996 for the murders of their wealthy parents in 1989. They claimed that they were abused by their parents and acted in self-defense, but the prosecution argued that the murders were motivated by the brothers' desire to inherit their parents' wealth. The trial was one of the most sensational and highly publicized in American history and was broadcast on court TV. After a lengthy and highly publicized trial, the Menendez brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case remains a source of fascination and controversy to this day.
Number 2.
At number 2 are Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun. These two are important figures in history. Adolf Hitler was the leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known as the Nazi Party, and later became the dictator of Germany. Eva Braun was his partner and later his wife. Hitler and Braun first met in 1929 when Braun was only 17 years old. She was then the secretary of Hitler's photographer, and the two became friends. In the years that followed, their relationship grew and they became increasingly connected. In 1933, after Hitler came to power, Braun began an open relationship with him. Although they were never officially married, they were considered a couple. Braun was often by Hitler's side and traveled with him to various parts of Europe. During World War II, Germany became increasingly desperate and Hitler became increasingly desperate. In April 1945, when it became clear that Germany would lose the war, Hitler and Braun were married in a small ceremony in his bunker in Berlin. A few days later, on April 30, 1945, they committed suicide together. Their bodies were then burned to prevent them from being captured by the Allies. Thus ended the lives of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, two of the most controversial figures in German history. Their actions during the war cost thousands of lives and had a lasting impact on the world.
Number 1.
Bonnie and Clyde were two infamous criminals who operated in the United States during the 1930s. They were known for their bank robberies and other crimes, and were very popular with the public due to their romantic relationship and their life on the run from the law. They met in Texas and quickly fell for each other. Together they began a life full of adventure and danger, traveling from state to state and robbing banks and other targets. Their popularity grew quickly, and they became known as Bonnie and Clyde in newspapers and on radios across the country. But their life on the run could not last forever. Eventually, they were caught by the police and sentenced to death after a short trial. On May 23, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde were shot and killed by a group of police officers on the road to Louisiana. However, their legendary story lives on to this day. Which killer couple did you already know? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon so you don't miss any videos.